Welcome back to the Angry Man Podcast with Jason and Greg. So, Canelo Alvarez has settled on 3 opponents, according to Michael Benson, for his return in May of 2024, Cinco de Mayo. But before we get into that, I want to talk about just overall Canelo. We've been dissatisfied for quite some time in terms of the level of competition that Canelo Alvarez has faced. Now, when you think about the fact that he moved up to 168 pounds and he unified the titles, I will say that I will give him grace in regards to that because unifying the title is what we want to do. We want to have one name, one face in every division. So I understand that. And because of that, you know, he faced some marginal competition, some weak competition at 168 pounds over the last several years. So we have been critical of Canelo Alvarez in regards to that. I liked the fight with Bivol. That was something that I was interested in seeing. But outside of Bivol, over the last 3 years or so, in Plant, I just feel like he hasn't really lived up to what we expect from someone of his stature, someone who is the pay-per-view star. We want to see him in the ring with competitive fighters and competitive fights. And a lot of people feel like he's been avoiding David Benavidez, and I feel like these next 3 opponents would suggest that is the very case, that he is not necessarily interested in getting in the ring with David Benavidez anytime soon. And personally, I think the longer he stalls David Benavidez out, I think the worse it will get, because personally, it seems like Canelo Alvarez is on the decline. So, who are the 3 names? Well, according to Michael Benson, the first name is Jermall Charlo. Now, we just saw Jermall Charlo as the co-main on David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade, and he won the fight against Jose Benavidez. But when you think about the way that he looked okay. It wasn't like he looked like the Maul of old. You know, he looked like a fighter coming off a 2.5-year layoff. You know, he didn't look quite as sharp as what we saw 2.5 years ago. Could not make the contractually agreed upon weight initially. So you had to, you know, move it up a little bit. You know, I question where Maul is right now in terms of just his overall dedication to the sport and, you know, his ability to get back to where he was a couple of years ago. I question that right now. So we saw what happened to Jermall Charlo as well. Wasn't competitive in the fight whatsoever. Was not willing to take the risk in order to be successful in the fight, or at least to win the fight. And so I just feel like right now, when you think about the Charlo name, I just don't think that there's a lot of luster on the Charlo name at this moment. So it's hard for me to believe that they're going to pick Jermall Charlo with the incident with Caleb Plant and how Mel performed. I'm struggling with seeing that. The next name mentioned is Jamie Mungia, who is a Golden Boy fighter of Latin descent. Is it possible that people may be interested in seeing that fight from the Latino community? Yeah, I think it's possible. I can tell you general boxing fans, at least in my personal opinion, would not be very interested in the Jamie Mungia versus Canelo Alvarez fight because no one thinks very highly of Jamie Mungia. He's at 168 pounds now. He moved up from 160, I think, a couple fights ago. And I just don't see anybody being interested in that fight outside of the Latino community. I'm not sure if they would be actually interested in that fight either. So, we'll see if that materializes. Honestly, personally, we've heard that Jamie Mungia is the leading name to get that fight for Cinco de Mayo. So I would anticipate that it's him. But, you know, they threw 3 names out there maybe to just, I don't know, to just try to change the narrative. Who knows? But we shall see. The final name is a name that has been actually throwing his own name in the hat. And that is Terence Bud Crawford. Now, most of you guys know how I feel in regards to Terence Crawford moving up 3 weight classes and getting the opportunity to face Canelo Alvarez. I think it's utterly ridiculous. We saw what Jamel was able to accomplish in the ring, and although I feel Terence Crawford would do a much better job because I think Terence Crawford would take the risk and has the requisite skills in order to be successful in the ring, or at least competitive in the ring with anyone. I just don't want to see, and I believe that there are weight classes for a reason, right? And so Terence Crawford moving up to face Canelo Alvarez, I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't think there's a whole lot of interest in it when you think about David Benavidez and versus a Terence Crawford. I just don't see the same level of interest. I feel like a lot of that interest was drummed up by Terence Crawford during a dead period where there was not a lot going on. And so a lot of channels like Fight Hub and Fight Hype were asking Canelo Alvarez as he had a fight about Terence Crawford. If you've noticed this, the buzz around the Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez fight has faded tremendously because Canelo Alvarez is no longer around to ask a question. And because of that, Terence Crawford is no longer bringing up Canelo's name because he knows it's not going to necessarily go anywhere like that right now. Canelo Alvarez is on record stating that he has nothing to gain truly from fighting Terence Crawford. Now, he did say, why, if the fight makes sense, hey, why not? But I think he said on multiple occasions based off of his comments that the fights really don't make sense because can Canelo make the same amount of money? Sure. Will Canelo get credit for being a welterweight moving up 3 divisions? I guess it'll be 2 divisions after his rematch with Errol Spence, if he's victorious in his rematch with Errol Spence, because I got to throw that caveat there. You never know, it's boxing. But in the event that he is successful in a rematch with Errol Spence, how much credit is Canelo Alvarez going to get for beating a bloated welterweight? And I don't care how much he walks around at. Nobody's going to give him credit. They're going to say the same thing that they said with Mel. For those of you who have the energy around Errol Spence and say you guys were interested in seeing Errol Spence in the ring with him, we never said that. We always thought Errol would lose to Canelo Alvarez as well. We absolutely never said that. But not only that, even for those who did say that, let's think about it this way. We saw what Mel was able to do. Mel is 3-4 inches taller than Terence Crawford. Moved up, was not competitive, couldn't deal with the power. Regardless of the skill level that Terence Crawford has, he will still have to deal with that power. So at the end of the day, even those who wanted to see Errol Spence in the ring with him, now we've gotten the opportunity to see a fighter move up and face Canelo Alvarez. When you know better, you do better. So whatever people thought back then, they have another data point to compare it to now. And that data point with new information, you make different decisions and you have different opinions. And then finally, I kind of struggle with that last name. And Michael Benson, he put out a lot of stuff. And from what I can see, he seems to be very reliable. But Terence Crawford really doesn't make sense for Cinco de Mayo because from our understanding, the rematch between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence is going to occur in February of 2024. So that means Terence Crawford is going to have a training camp, or at least start training camp, maybe in this month, right? You would be starting somewhere in this month for his training camp, 8 to 10 weeks. So if that is the case, then he will have a training camp going into a fight in February. And in the event that he is successful in that fight, then he will go right back into training camp for a fight with Canelo Alvarez. That really makes sense. So I doubt Terence Crawford is the third name. I think probably it's just Jermall Charlo and Jamie Mungia, even though he did report Terence Bud Crawford. But I don't see that happening whatsoever unless Errol Spence will be willing to step aside and allow Terence Crawford to make that fight, which I personally doubt he would be unless there's some way to gain an advantage over Terence Crawford in a rematch later on. So we'll see what ends up happening. It'll be interesting to see if this fight is made or what fight is made for Canelo Alvarez. Hopefully he does the right thing and he fights David Benavidez next. But you tell me what you think. Don't forget to hate, like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Angry Man Podcast, AM Sports Media, and I am out.